حضورنا الكريم إلى جلستنا التالية، وهي إحدى مواضيعي المفضلة، الميتافيرس، أحدث ما توصلت إليه التكنولوجيا في عالم الويب وشبكة الإنترنت. فهو يجمع ما بين الواقع الافتراضي والواقع المعزز والواقع المختلط أيضا، إلى جانب البيئة ثلاثية الأبعاد وتقنيات الذكاء الاصطناعي أيضا، لتكون معا عالما افتراضيا واسعا يكاد أن يكون بديلا عن العالم الحقيقي. لذا يسرنا أن ندعو الآن المدير المؤسس لمختبر التفاعل البشري الافتراضي في جامعة ستانفورد ومؤلف الكتاب الأكثر مبيعا بعنوان Experience on Demand، سندعو الأستاذ والسيد جيرمي بايلنسون ليلقي كلمة الرئيسية تحت عنوان نحو الميتافيرس. فلنرحب به جميعا.
Hello and good afternoon. I want to thank you very much for your attention today. I want to thank the RTA for their generosity and their amazing conference that they've thrown. I've had a wonderful few days talking to you, learning from you, and more importantly, spending the first time to visit Dubai, and what a wonderful country, what a wonderful time that I've had here. So I am thrilled to be here. And I'm thrilled to talk to you about virtual reality and the metaverse as a medium, and in particular, how virtual reality and the metaverse can help us think about project management. So my name is Jeremy Balanson. My PhD 25 years ago was in artificial intelligence and psychology. In 1999, I switched fields and I learned how to build the hardware to create virtual reality. And I learned how to think about virtual reality as a medium to study communication, social interaction, training, education. In the year 2003, I was lucky enough to get a job at Stanford University in California. And for the last 20 years, I've been building a research program that I'll talk to you today about, which is how VR can help work. To give you a sense of how the next 45 minutes will go, first, we're going to talk about the metaverse, make sure everyone has definitions of the technology, and really start by defining this medium, because this word is used a lot, and I want to make sure that we all understand it. Next, before we talk about how wonderful the opportunities around virtual reality are, we're going to talk about the things virtual reality is not good for, and set some boundaries on when we should use this medium and when we should avoid it. Then we're going to go through 4 case studies related to project management, collaboration, training, empathy, and telepresence. And as one of the themes of this conference is well-being, I chose these 4 case studies to talk about project management, but also to focus on well-being and using this medium not just because it's there, but using it in ways to help people be better at work. So when I first entered the field of virtual reality, if you look at all of the headsets on the right side of the screen there, when I started in 1999, every single one of those headsets, they cost about $40,000 US, about the price of an automobile. There was only about 500 of them in existence, and when one of them broke, we had to stop studying it and send it back to the manufacturer. Virtual reality, when I first entered, it was a medium that was very rare and very difficult. Now, headsets cost a few $100s. My estimates in 2021, worldwide, there's about 15 million of them sold. And as this medium, which I've been studying for 25 years, as it goes from something that was very expensive and clunky and heavy and rare to something that is plentiful and easy to use, the question is, what are we going to do in virtual reality? What are we going to do there? And when we talk about the metaverse and this use of virtual reality and augmented reality, you hear this term a lot. And what I would like us to do as a definition, when we define what the metaverse is, we can think about it in terms of people, places, and things. The reason I like to make this distinction between people, places, and things is that each of these dimensions has a different group of people who work on them, different fields it's relevant for, and a different area of research and applications that we'd be discussing. So I'm going to start with the things part. When we think about virtual things, we think about 3D models or images or what's called non-fungible tokens. These are 3D models that are marked as verified on the blockchain. And we're not going to talk a lot today about things, but I want you to be aware of when we talk about the metaverse, one of the areas that a lot of people are focusing on are NFTs, 3D models, and things. There's also places. If you think about the metaverse and you're going to a virtual layer, there's got to be a grid, a map, and that map, that virtual map, that layer that we all go and visit, it's got to be persistent and consistent. By persistent, I mean it's got to exist when you're not there. So for the metaverse to exist, when you leave, you take off the headset, you close down the computer, it's got to stay there and keep running. Moreover, it's got to be consistent. So there's a huge, there's a boom that started about a year ago where people are paying a lot of money for real estate inside the metaverse and lots of speculation about where I should buy and what platform to buy in. And if I'm going to spend money on a place in the metaverse, that map has got to stay consistent. In the real world, you can't just move borders and areas on a map. In the metaverse, you actually can do that fairly easily. So when we think about places in the metaverse, it's about real estate and about choosing which platform and which location. But we're not going to talk about that today because I want to talk about the area of the metaverse that's relevant to project management, and that's going to be people. And so when we talk about people, we think about how people use this medium, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Dubai, when the history of the metaverse is written, is going to be taking a very large role in the future of how we think about this. Lots of innovation going on in this country. One of my roles, I'm on the Metaverse Steering Committee for the World Economic Forum, and we meet here once a year. There is a large pool from the innovators and the leaders here to think about innovation and job creation around NFTs. So I'm thrilled to be talking to this audience today about this medium. For those of you that have put on the headset and have tried virtual reality, you've probably had a similar reaction to Popper. This is my grandfather. He was 91 in this photograph, and he put on the virtual reality goggles, and like many of you who've tried it, looked around and said, oh, this is pretty cool, and I find this exciting, and it's a new experience, but I don't really see the point. That was what he said. I don't see the point. He said to me, Jeremy, what am I supposed to do in here? And for a lot of us that have tried virtual reality, we struggle to see the relevance of the medium to our day-to-day life or our weekly work life. And so what we're going to do today in this talk is focus on what you should do in VR and where VR as a medium earns its keep. Now, when I say where VR as a medium earns its keep, virtual reality is a medium that is not free. First of all, it is the most distracting medium ever invented. You put on these goggles, you can't see anything, you can't hear anything. By definition, virtual reality replaces stimuli and perceptions from the real world. It changes what you see and it changes what you hear. You're totally immersed in a virtual world. Therefore, it's not a kind of medium that we can sit in a meeting, put on these goggles, and just be separated from our colleagues all the time. It's a very distracting medium, and it can be a very isolating medium. Therefore, it's not something we want to use all the time. You can think about addiction. Lots of us probably think we use our phones too often, and we can talk about isolation, and when in virtual reality, when every single party is the best party you've ever been to, and everything is a perfect simulation, we have to think about, we don't want to replace real experiences. I still want to come and see you, and I got the pleasure of having dinner with you last night and meeting a number of you, and I want to have those experiences. We don't want to replace reality with virtual reality. We want virtual reality to be a tool that augments the wonderful experiences we have in day-to-day life. Simulator sickness is a real issue with virtual reality. After a while, you get a little bit dizzy sometimes, some eye strain. Maybe you get a bit nauseous, the same way that you get motion sick if you're on an amusement park ride. For this reason, in my companies that I work with and in my labs, we have a 30-minute rule, which is we don't use VR for more than 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you take the headsets off and you go and you have some water and you talk to another human being. So it's not a medium you can use for too long. I do a lot of work with virtual reality in children. So many of you are thinking, oh, there's holidays, there's gifts and birthdays, and should I get my children or my grandchildren virtual reality? We've been running a number of studies with hundreds and hundreds of kids as young as 3 years old, where we immerse them in VR and we give them experiences. So I'll show you a video here of a 6-year-old.
Look at both of them, and I want to have them do a couple things for us, okay? Ready?
She's meeting a character.
Hello there! It's a sign! Your lovable furry friend Grover.
You can see she gets startled, and she is treating this character as if it were real.
Follow our crazy moves. You can do it.
Okay. All right.
So with children, what we've found is 3 things. Number 1 is that, first of all, the good news. When you have a young child who goes into virtual reality and they spend about 5 to 10 minutes, they're meeting a cartoon character, their parents are nearby, they're all fine. No one's gotten hurt, no one's had nightmares, no one's vision's gotten damaged. It's okay to use VR with kids in small doses with good content and their parents around. On the other hand, we've documented what's called reality blurring. For example, if this girl has an experience and she's swimming around with whales, if you bring her back a week later, on average, children are more likely to believe their virtual reality experience was an actual one if they watch it in virtual reality compared to seeing it on a television. In other words, VR feels so real, it's responding to your body. You can see there she starts dancing with Grover when he asks her to. Children form actual memories from the virtual reality thinking it was real. So we call this reality blurring, and it's something to pay attention to. The third thing that we notice is compliance. So in virtual reality, if a character asks kids for something, can you give me something? For example, in one experiment, after the experiment, we handed kids 10 stickers. Kids love stickers. And we said, you know who also really loves stickers is that character that you just met inside virtual reality. If you want, you can take all 10 of those stickers home, or you can give some to Grover, but if you give some to that character, you don't get to take them home. When kids meet that character in virtual reality, they give away more of their stickers compared to in the real world. So when you study kids, you have to get creative on how you show the influence of a medium upon them. And so the measures are a bit unique. However, what we've shown is that VR affects kids in a way that's pretty intense. So we want to be very careful with children. So to sum up, with virtual reality, we talked about the downsides. It can be so distracting. I wouldn't know there's a stair here and I could fall off. It could be addictive because the experiences are always perfect. You can get a little bit dizzy or simulator sick if you use it for too long, and we have to be especially careful with kids. Therefore, what 25 years has taught me, and what I tell all of the large companies and the small companies that I work with as they develop their strategies towards this medium, I call it the DICE acronym. Virtual reality is a special medium. It's intense. We should save it for experiences that if you did them in the real world, they'd be very special experience. And what the DICE acronym says is save virtual reality for things, if you did them in the real world, would be dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive. So let's talk about those individually. All the examples I'm going to go over today with the case studies show these examples. But dangerous, for example, firefighters have to learn how to fight fires. We can train them in virtual reality so they don't get hurt during training. Or things that are impossible. I'm going to show you today some well-being and empathy demos where you literally become someone else. You change bodies and you enter someone else and you walk a mile in their shoes. Counterproductive. We can talk about showing someone the effects of deforestation or of damaging coastlines, but they can learn the lesson without having to actually damage that themselves. or expensive. If I'm teaching someone how to do public speaking, like I'm doing now in front of 2,000 people, it's expensive to hire 2,000 actors to train someone to speak, but in virtual reality, that lesson is free and repeatable. So in other words, as we begin to think about virtual reality as a medium, we shouldn't use it for everything. We should start with the things that are dangerous in the real world, impossible, counterproductive, or very, very expensive. And I'm going to go over those individually through our case studies. But another way of saying this is that in 5 years, if you're putting on virtual reality goggles to check your email, then I, as an evangelist, as a keeper of this technology, have done something horribly wrong. Your phone works just fine for your email. You don't need to put on VR goggles to read your email. You don't need to put on VR goggles to watch a video. The video screen works fine for that. So save VR for very special experiences. So the first case study I want to go over is about projects and collaboration. And what I've been doing for the last 3 years, for about over half of my work week, is I've been building and implementing and studying a metaverse that we built at Stanford University for collaboration. We've now taught 4 classes, almost 600 students, and just under 500,000 minutes of all of us being together in VR. And I'm going to talk about this project, but this has been one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my career. It's been, for one who's been teaching about this medium for almost 3 decades, to be able to use it now for real projects and real collaboration has been exciting. So if you're going to try to do this for your projects, the first thing you need to decide upon is hardware. Hardware with virtual reality is challenging. It's, as I said earlier, it's gotten much cheaper, but you need to make your decision on which headset you're going to use. We chose to use 2 different headsets, the Oculus Quest back then, that's now called the MetaQuest, owned by the company Meta, formerly Facebook, and the Pico Neo 2 back then. Each of those headsets costs about $300 to $400 for one, and about $700 per headset for the other. But I was lucky enough to have Stanford buy us almost 300 of these, and we've been provisioning these headsets and shipping them around to students and to the people who are involved in this Metaverse project. They receive the headset at home, in their home office, and they put on the headsets, and they join together as avatars. You also have to make a decision about a platform. A platform allows all of the hard work about networking us together as avatars to get done without having you have to program it. So in 1999, when I was building VR simulations to network 2 people, I had to do the hand coding in Python in order to allow it so when one person moved their hand, the other people would see that person's hand go up. All the basic rules about how to make avatars work, or how to allow for learning and collaboration. So if we're going to be designing a shared architectural space, and I start to build out that space and I want you to see it, you've got to have the basic primitive technology that allows us to design and to occupy those spaces together. We chose a platform called Engage. It's an incredible platform for collaboration and managing projects. I would recommend it highly. I have no formal affiliation with them. They're a publicly traded company out of the UK, and I really enjoy their platform for project management. It just works really well. Most importantly, and this is going to surprise some of you, but the hardest thing about doing project management in VR is not necessarily the technology, but it's actually figuring out what to do when you come together. So the curriculum is much harder than one would think to make VR time productive. And so for part of what we did in our journey of building this metaverse is we had to figure out, if my students are going to spend 3 to 4 hours together in the headset, in VR, what are they going to do? And that is part of the art of designing productive project management, is if there's something that can be done on a video conference easily, then you can save that for the video conference. When you're going into VR, you should do things that are special. So for example, we did well-being exercises in virtual reality. So in this instance, everybody put on the headsets, and we had these pads that you see, and we had an instructor, an exercise instructor, who taught us about proper breathing and how to be present in the workplace and different exercises. But to make it special in VR, those platforms that you see, they all rose up slowly, and we went into outer space. And so all the students in my class, there was 200 of us, we saw each other's avatars. We were in outer space looking down at the Earth. And we were looking down at the Earth, experiencing what's called the overview effect, with this incredible sense of awe that you get, that astronauts get when they're looking down at the Earth. So we were in virtual reality together, and we were being led by an instructor on how to do well-being exercises. And we were in outer space, something you could only do in VR. And one of the, coming up with curricula that leverage what makes VR amazing, being together in outer space is one example, is a challenge. And as you design your projects to go into the metaverse, spending a lot of time thinking about curriculum is very important. The other thing I think about constantly is nonverbal behavior. So if you look on your right side of the room there, you can see a standard Zoom call. And if you look at the two people on the bottom, when you see those two people, you think they're looking at each other, right? It looks as if they're looking at one another. As you likely know from being on many, many video conference calls, they're not. They're looking off screen. However, our brains are primed to automatically interpret nonverbal behavior. So on a video conference, you're getting all these nonverbal cues, but they're not diagnostic of real social interaction. Those two people are not looking at each other, but we automatically assume, why are they looking at each other? Do they have some special bond? Are they saying some sidebar conversation? In VR, what we found early on is we don't do it for every meeting, but for meetings where you want to have what's called social presence. You want to feel like you're together. The same way, when we were dining together last night, or when we were in the hallway, it feels like we're there. And you can reach out and have a handshake. And so in our small group discussions, when you see the woman in the red shirt, when she leans toward the man in the red sweater, everyone else can see that she leaned towards him. And when somebody turns their head to look at another person, we can all see where that person is looking. So the nonverbal cues are preserved. And this adds to a ton of well-being aspects of conversation. So first of all, we should all be face-to-face whenever we can. I'm not trying to say we should replace great conferences like this with virtual ones. But if you have to have a video conference and you want it to feel real, this is something you can do to leverage the natural human ability to want to have real eye contact, to want to have spatial relations in conversation. One of the things that I do, I'm a quantitative psychologist, and we compute real outcome measures around social interaction and around collaboration. When you think about how people collaborate, one of the best metrics is called synchrony, which is how people move their bodies together. And here's a correlation graph that shows that you can actually compute that little bump in the middle there is when you've got these small groups, when they're synchronous, it means that their movements are correlated. So when I lean forward, you lean forward. And when I shake my head, you'll shake your head. It's a correlation of all of our movements. When you have a project in the metaverse, you get to measure human behavior at the millisecond level, at what we call the biological band, and at the social level, because they're in VR for months and months at a time. So for managers who are trying to quantify group performance, it's a measurement tool that's never been present in the history of social science. We can now measure your social behavior over seconds, weeks, or months, and we can ask the fundamental question, how do groups form? How do they perform from a nonverbal standpoint when you follow a group over time? Because VR, unlike any other medium, it tracks the XYZ position of your hand, or if you moved your head 10 degrees to the right, you can build these models and ask the question, how do groups form? So let's leave the world of my metaverse class, but please take home the messages that I sent there, that the metaverse is an incredible way to help group meetings. It's not for everything, and we should think hard about the content that we put in. I now want to talk about training. And so why do we have something called a flight simulator? We have a flight simulator, and the one that I'm showing you here is from 1929, We have a flight simulator because the way people learn is you do stuff, you perform, you make mistakes, you get feedback about those mistakes, and then you repeat it over and over and over again. And that is how the human brain likes to learn. Try, fail, get feedback, repeat. The reason we have a flight simulator is because that process doesn't work in an airplane, right? You don't want to make mistakes when you're in an airplane. It's a very expensive way to make a mistake. Hence, we have the training flight simulator. With corporate training, if you think here on the y-axis, you've got the ability to scale some kind of a project training, okay? Where going higher on the y-axis is the high ability to scale, and then on the x-axis is how effective that training is. And you can see high up on the top left-hand corner there, manuals, they're easy to scale because you just hand somebody a PDF file or you hand them a piece of paper. So it scales easily, but it's not that effective when you're learning training from a manual. On the other hand, a one-on-one expert mentor, if you look on the bottom right there, is the best way to be taught, but that's super expensive to have the world's expert teach you one-on-one about something important. What I'm going to make the case for in the next 10 to 12 minutes is that virtual reality gives you the best of both worlds. It scales up because once you've built it, it's digital and you can share it with millions of people, but it feels like the real world, so you have all the efficacy you'd get from a one-on-one training. And what I'm going to talk about, how I enter the world of corporate training, comes through American football. Okay, so the quarterback position in American football, you have to go to the line of scrimmage and you've got to make some decisions. In the year 2013, I had a graduate student, his name was Derek Belch, and he played on the Stanford football team. We built training simulations for the quarterback. And when the quarterback goes up to the line of scrimmage, he's got to look around, and he's got to read the defense, and he's got to make a decision. So I'm going to show you that video a couple times. So quarterback goes to the line of scrimmage, and he's got to look around, and based on what that defense is doing, and he's only got a second, it's very confusing, he's got to decide if he's going to keep the play that he had when he went to the line of scrimmage, that's called let it roll, or if he's going to go to the next play down the queue, that's called kill, kill, kill. And so the decision the quarterback has to make depends on what he sees, and it has to happen in about 2 seconds. He looks around, and he's got to make that decision. So with Derek, his master's thesis, we built training simulations for the quarterbacks, where the quarterbacks practiced reading defenses. We'd build simulations for the team we were going to play every Saturday. We play a football game. By Wednesday, we'd get the simulations to the quarterback, and the quarterbacks would practice in VR. Now, when I say practice, they're not learning how to kick the ball. They're not learning how to throw the ball. They do that on the field. They're doing decision making. They're simply looking around, practicing where to look, when to look, taking in what they see, and making the decision about what play to run. That season in 2013-2014, Stanford football vastly outperformed the expectations, and both the coach of the team as well as the quarterback at the time, Kevin Hogan, said that virtual reality was one of the reasons, not the only reason, one of the reasons why the teams did so well. So Derek graduates January 1st, 2015, forms a company called Striver, and I'm a co-founder of the company. And Derek proceeds then to start selling this training module to lots and lots of football teams and basketball teams and baseball teams. And in a couple of years, it was prolific watching all the teams using VR to train. For example, this is the United States Olympic skiing team. When you go for the Winter Olympics in 2018, every country gets 3 days on the mountain to practice skiing down that run. You only get 3 days. And so as part of our 3-day budget, we filmed the run in virtual reality using the fancy cameras to create a VR version of it. So our Olympians then got to train in the United States as if they were on the mountain in Korea, and they got to kind of look around and practice where they would be on that run and just get the overall gestalt feel of the slope. And it was a really nice tool for them to train. This is a screenshot from a 360 video. We worked with the German national soccer team the year they won the World Cup and the year prior to that. And for soccer, or what you would call football, the training is really for goalies. It really works well for goalies to practice, for example, reading the body language of somebody on a penalty kick, or this is a corner kick, and the goalie really figuring out and practicing spacing. And we did a lot of work training people to have situational awareness, because remember, VR is a spatial medium. It's about looking around and moving your body. But when the history of virtual reality is written, one of the more important events that occurred happened in Arkansas in 2016. Okay, in 2016 in Arkansas, there's a company called Walmart, which you've likely heard of, which is the huge company, which is based in Arkansas. Everybody loves sports, and so Brock, who is the head of training at Walmart, wandered into the football office, and Brock put on the goggles, and he did that NFL quarterback training, because we were training the Arkansas Razorbacks, which is the team, a college team in Arkansas. And he walked into the University of Arkansas simulation room, tried it, and he said, everything you're doing with athletes, which is training them to recognize a pattern, make a decision based on what they see and hear, and then tell others about it, is what every single Walmart employee has to do every day. And so what began was a journey where we started building simulations for Walmart. So you might ask, well, what would a Walmart employee do to train in virtual reality? We have a day called Holiday Rush, or Black Friday, the day after a holiday called Thanksgiving, where it is incredibly chaotic. The store is crowded and there's lines and it's stressful and arousing. But because of turnover, only 1 in 2 Walmart employees have actually been there before. So we have them practice this incredibly stressful day with these big crowds, and they become better at their jobs. Or we do practicing hospitality and customer service. So practicing, just like the flight simulator, you want to make mistakes in VR so you get better in the real world. So how do you deal with a difficult customer? Or we put them in the kitchen or behind the deli counter, and we have them look for safety violations. So look around and try to find something that's not right in this room. So we found a lot of things that we could train Walmart for. The efficacy was so high that we have now installed in every single one of the Walmarts in the United States, and there's 4,700 of them. If you walk in and you go to the back room, and there will be 3 or 4 VR training simulations inside every single Walmart. And so it's a level of scale that is unheard of in the history of virtual reality. Over 1 million Walmart employees have put on the goggles and gotten better at their job. And this medium that I've been studying for 20 years, it's a huge moment of scale. This is the Walmart pickup tower. Previously, it took 8 hours for employees to train. There's 1.5 million Walmart associates, and they all had to learn how to use this pickup tower, but there was only a few of them. They had to travel to physical stores, and then they had to do an 8-hour-long training. We've created a 15-minute training module, only 15 minutes, that has as high efficacy as the physical 8-hour one. So if you do the math there, 1.5 million associates no longer have to go through an 8-hour-long training day, and it saves them a lot of money on costs. We've recently started working with banks, and why that's important, if you want to work with banks in virtual reality, you've got to make yourself secure for fintech, for financial technology. And VR has got, it's a new medium, and making it secure for banking has been a challenge. We are now in every single one of Bank of America's 4,300 stores, doing everything from having people detect fraud in virtual reality as a training simulation to security measures, what to do in a security situation, where do you stand, where do you look, really nice training tool. Soft skills training is a new buzzword that we see a lot, and how can you have an employee be really good at dealing with customers, conversations, so a manager who's got to have a difficult conversation around performance, if somebody's going to fire you, you lose your job, that conversation as an employee, that conversation is going to stay with you. If the manager can do a more humane job in that hard conversation, it's going to make someone's life a lot better. And so we don't often have practice on really difficult conversations. And so we've been doing a lot of work with Verizon on how to train their managers on conversational training within the workplace. And I think for project managers in particular, again, think of the flight simulator. Think of the hardest conversation you've ever had to have at work. And now think about being able to practice that 10 times in a simulation that feels real. So it actually seems as if you're doing it, and it's a wonderful tool. The third case study we're going to talk about is empathy. So how can I use VR to help me become someone who's got higher empathy for others? And so empathy is really hard. I'm going to show you a demonstration that I built 20 years ago. So don't laugh at my computer graphics. These are fairly old, but this leverages a psychological theory called body transfer. Okay? So this is a graduate student named Nick Yee, and Nick is going to walk up to a virtual mirror. You can see his avatar in the mirror. As he moves his physical body, he sees his mirror image. It really feels like it's you. And after about 2 minutes of physically moving and seeing your avatar move with you, body transfer occurs. It feels like it's you. So he bends down, I hit a button, and he comes up, and he's now a woman. And so what I've done here is I put someone in an avatar body, I've made them have a connection with that body, and now they become someone else. It can be somebody older. It can be someone with a different skin color. It can be someone who's a different gender, like I just showed you. And so now that you're wearing that other person's body, you then walk around in a simulation, and others treat you differently. So imagine you're in a training simulation, and you're thinking about gender balance, or you're thinking about equality, or you're just thinking about how to be nicer to people who are employees, because we all can be nicer, we all try hard, but we all can have more empathy. In this simulation, you become the other person, and you experience hardship while you're wearing their body. Here's an example of an experiment that we've now run thousands of people, and we're now installing this in lots of places in the United States. It's called Becoming Homeless. And in the United States, we've got a homeless problem, and especially in California, there's lots of homeless people. In order to solve the problem, we've got to change our policies and to think about how we approach this. And how can you get policymakers to connect more with the problem? So in this simulation, you are trying to live in your house, but you get fired from your job, and you're selling things in your apartment quickly, you're in virtual reality, and you get evicted, and so you're trying to live in your car because you couldn't make your rent, but it's illegal to live in your car, and so the police come and pull you over, and they evict you, and now you're trying to sleep on this bus, but you can't because that man's harassing you, and the other man is trying to take your things, and so you're experiencing firsthand what it's like to lose your home. Of course, it's not really like losing your home because this is just a 15-minute media simulation. However, it's incredibly powerful. It really feels in your body like there's an issue happening, and you can connect with the narrative that not everyone's homeless because of who they are. It's not always about internal stuff. This was situational, right? You lost your job, you tried to sell stuff in your apartment, you even tried to live in your car, and you learn more about that journey. And what our research has shown is that this changes people's behavior. So in a typical study, we'll ask someone, will you sign a petition to support more affordable housing initiatives in California? We were just talking on our panel about projects and housing and ways to think about this long term, which was an amazing panel. Thank you to our panelists for that previous one. And in this study, what we showed is that people are more willing to consider affordable housing measures after they've gone through the simulation in virtual reality compared to watching it on a 2D screen. So this medium, it's a powerful motivator for behavior change, and these effects even last months after you try the experience. So in this simulation, it's called Becoming Homeless. We've made this simulation free for people to download. If you just search Stanford Virtual Reality, you'll find it. You can also have empathy not just to other people, but to yourself. And so there is a philosopher called Parfit who's long argued that people were really good at imagining pleasure soon. So all of us can imagine a big meal with lots of dessert we're going to have right after this is over because we've all worked so hard today and learned so much. But it's very hard to imagine pain in the distant future. Consequently, humans, we're not so good at deferring gratification. Some of us are better than others, but deferring gratification is a skill that we can work on, and humans are notoriously not fantastic at. And so what we did in this line of research, and this is run by a professor named Hal Hirschfield in the business school at UCLA. He was a student in my lab when he did this work. You walked up to that virtual mirror just like I showed you. And in this instance, before you went to the mirror, we scanned your body. We used special cameras, and so your avatar looked just like you. And then when you went up to the mirror, you walked up to this mirror, we hit a button, and all of a sudden your face started to morph. And while you were looking at yourself in the mirror, you went from a 20-year-old, which you see there on the left-hand side, to a 75-year-old version of yourself. So you aged right in front of your eyes, and you are now wearing the body of your future self. Okay? So you spend some time in your future self, and we have you really feel like it's your body and engage in some conversations to talk about the future while wearing this future self avatar. We then give you a choice. You can have $20 now, or if you put it in a savings account, we'll give you $40. So Hal, he really cared about retirement savings. So in the United States, we've got a huge problem with that people in their 20s are not putting money in the bank to save for retirement. They're going to live till they're 90 because of medical advances, but they're going to be in poverty from the ages of 60 to 90. And so the motivation for this work, can I, using VR, connect someone viscerally to their future so that they have enough connection to that future self so they're going to defer gratification, taking that $20 now and going to get a nice meal, and instead of taking that gratification, put the money in the bank. So we ran a number of studies. This was Hal's dissertation, published it in academic journals. Turns out virtual reality, more than anything anyone's tried, has caused people to defer gratification and is more likely to not take the money now, but to put it into an account for their future. So we published this work, but the fun part is now working with companies to implement it. And so this is a product from Bank of America called Face Retirement. And what Face Retirement does is it scans your face from the webcam on a camera or phone. And then when you form an account with B of A, you may be asked to engage in, do you want to join what's called Face Retirement? If you do, it produces a future self version of you. And then your future self becomes part of your banking interface such that every decision you make about your financial future, your future self is staring at you. Okay? And then the more money you put in your savings account, we animate a smile for the future self, and your future self gets happier when you save more money. And so this is an example of taking the academic research and putting it in companies, and it turns out clients love this, and it's causing, at a large scale, people to put more money in their retirement accounts, which is really good for all of us. One piece I'll mention because we're about to release it for free is something called Thousand Cut Journey. This is a piece about black-white racism where you become a black male. In the United States, there's lots of problems around race and particularly around anti-black racism. And in this experience, you become a black male called Michael Sterling, and you walk around as a young child, as a teenager, and as an adult experiencing racial bias. It's an incredibly powerful narrative. It feels very intense, and we've now been working for almost 10 years on this project, 8 years now. We're about to release it for free, so if this area of research about well-being and empathy is interesting to you, please keep your eyes out for this. The final case study, we have about 3 minutes, and that's enough time to hopefully get you excited about telepresence. And so one of the things about the metaverse, as we mentioned earlier, the hardware is great, it works really well, but there's not a lot of content. And so one thing I think a lot about is, can you build content that makes VR and augmented reality feel real? And I'm going to tell you about one of the most mind-blowing things that I ever saw in augmented reality, and it was built by a genius named Hansol Jun. Hansol is a PhD student who just graduated from my lab, and what he built was a system to capture holograms. And this is an augmented reality. So there he's wearing the Microsoft HoloLens, and augmented reality, you can still see the real world, but there's a virtual layer that's kind of positioned on top. And so I'd seen avatars, that is representations of humans, my entire career, but the first time I ever saw in augmented reality an avatar in my space, it just utterly blew my mind. So to kind of make you see what that feels like, I'm wearing the HoloLens, the Microsoft HoloLens, and right here, there's another human. And the human is standing, their feet are on the floor right here. And I'm wearing the HoloLens, it's still right there. If I take a step towards them, they're still there. And when they look over there, it's because they're looking at the podium. And so Hansol built this, using a very expensive hardware, software system. And it blew my mind enough that I knew that we needed to study this and we needed to think about how one could scale this up. And what we have now released in a preliminary way is something called Telegy. And so for Hans Sewell, he really wanted this to work not with a very, a supercomputer. And so now if you have an iPhone, and iPhones tend to have 3D cameras in them, which is an infrared system that can get depth, a depth camera, in addition to the RGB camera. So from a camera, we've devised a system that you can capture a hologram of someone or any stereoscopic object on video, but more importantly, it runs on low enough latency, meaning when a person moves, the avatar moves shortly thereafter, and it updates often enough to make it feel good. And we've been working on this for 5 years and studying it, showing that it's a very effective tool for communication because of these nonverbal cues that I just discussed. I'm showing a screenshot of the app not because I'm trying to sell it to you, because it's free. We put Telegy online on the App Store, and it is anyone with a 3D camera can download it and use it for free and create your own 3D videos, and thinking about a way to democratize content, right? Because as we know, there's just not enough content in virtual reality and augmented reality, and now we're enabling anyone with an iPhone to do, or any kind of a 3D camera, it could be an Amazon phone or others, to capture people and capture scenes. So I want to thank you again for your attention. I want to thank RTA for bringing me out here and including me in this amazing journey that we've had over the past 4 days. This is my book. It's called Experience on Demand. I believe I'll be signing some copies just after this talk. And once again, I want to thank you for your great attention.